All right, they say YouTube is down for some people. I know my last show was really long, but I didn't think it would crash YouTube. Trisha McLaughlin, the spokesliar for the Department of Homeland Security, is reportedly quitting the Trump administration. That's according to Politico. But then again, she could just be making more crap up. In announcing her resignation by force of habit, McLaughlin referred to herself as a domestic terrorist. The Pentagon reporting that on Monday, the United States military killed 11 people when it took out 3 boats carrying alleged narco-terrorists. 2 ships in the Eastern Pacific were destroyed, as were all 8 people on board. That would be a war crime. That would be murder. That's a fact. That's not conjecture. That's a fact. 3 others were killed when the United States military took out a ship, killing everyone on board. Murder. So far, there have been 42 known attacks in what is being called Operation Southern Spear, which began last fall. The Associated Press says 145 human beings in total have been killed. You look at the Epstein story, you know how some people view human life. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. A lot to get to, but let's start off with the pedophiles. And the focus turns to Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, a 7,750-acre spread the pedophile purchased in 1993 from Bruce King, a Democrat who served as New Mexico's 23rd, 25th, and 28th governor. He died in 2009 at the age of 85. So much of the focus has been on Epstein's Palm Beach and Manhattan activities, but Zorro Ranch had its own helipad, its own airstrip, and we know from countless victims, this ranch is where a lot of the sex trafficking took place. Source New Mexico reporting that the New Mexico State House of Representatives has established a Truth Committee, a new subcommittee with a budget of $2 million that they can spend over the next year probing what exactly went on inside Zorro Ranch, who knew, and who abetted. You're looking at New Mexico Democratic State Representative Andreu Romero, who co-sponsored the bill, which set up this committee. It will have at its disposal, as I said, $2 million, and that comes from a financial settlement between the state of New Mexico and the banks that failed to alert police in New Mexico to what was obviously illegal activity on Zorro Ranch. Much of that money comes from Deutsche Bank, Trump's old lender, which was also ordered to pay the federal government a $75 million fine in 2023 for the role it played in financing Jeffrey Epstein's sprawling network of child trafficking, 1,000 victims that we know of so far. So they had to pay a $75 million fine in 2023, Deutsche Bank did, to make it all go away. Imagine that, paying fines. No criminal charges. Nobody from Deutsche Bank held criminally liable. You know, I'm glad Trump stole from Deutsche Bank. Here's an interesting piece in today's Jacobin. It's entitled The Epstein Whistleblower Who Was Silenced. It's written by Veronica Ricklebean and Freddie Brewster. It was originally published in The Lever. They write that the Epstein files have several documents revealing that a compliance officer with Deutsche Bank was fired in 2018 after she alerted her supervisors to suspicious activity involving the accounts of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Let's read from this, shall we? This is from Jacobin, which everybody should subscribe to, and The Lever. You should subscribe to The Lever. So this is from this article. The former anti-money laundering official detailed mind-boggling cryptocurrency transactions between Kushner's company and a Russian individual. She also claimed that she was punished after raising concern about more than 100 politically connected individuals who had been shielded from typical anti-money laundering reviews. Well, Jacobin writes, Tammy Hill McFadden, according to a July 12, 2019 FBI report, said she alerted Deutsche Bank supervisors to suspicious activity involving Jeffrey Epstein wiring large amounts of cash to young women in their early 20s. And instead of looking into her allegations, she was fired. And then there's this tidbit, which under normal circumstances would be a bombshell, but yawn. In the FBI report, McFadden also makes previously unpublicized revelations about an incident that she claims sparked a retaliation campaign against her. In late 2015, McFadden alleged she found 102 politically exposed persons who were high-risk individuals that should have been addressed immediately, but whose designation in the bank's internal anti-money laundering system had been deferred indefinitely. I think I'm reading you the same thing okay. I had another tidbit, but we made a mistake. Okay. Rancho Zorro was worth repeating. Rancho Zorro was sold in 2023 at public auction, where the proceeds supposedly went towards Epstein's victims. It was initially valued at $27.5 million when it was first put up for sale in 2021. Don Huffines, a businessman and former Texas state senator, was able to buy it in 2023 for only $13.4 million, claiming the property's Epstein association made it worth far less. Huffines changed the name from Rancho Zorro to Rancho de San Rafael and said he hopes to transform it into a nonprofit Christian retreat. Huffines says he's reclaiming the ranch for Jesus and, quote, turning what the enemy once meant for evil into good. He plans to ask the local Catholic archdiocese to run the day-to-day operations. I'm kidding. I made the last part up. Huffines is a Republican currently running for the post of Texas comptroller, and with the Republican primaries March 3rd. Midterms are in full bloom right now. So with Republican primaries on March 3rd in Texas, questions have arisen as to how and why Huffines purchased Epstein's ranch and whether the proceeds did, in fact, go to Epstein's victims, as Huffines claimed. An attorney for the Epstein estate reportedly said all the proceeds from the sale went towards administrative fees and not the victims. What is this? What am I donating to the PBS? Everything goes to administrative fees? Yeah. According to the lawyers for the Epstein estate, the victims didn't get any of the money. It all went to administrative fees, like the United Way. More on the pedophiles, and our top pedophile, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, continues to come under fire as more and more people are calling into question his association with Jeffrey Epstein. That's why we're on the Lutnick Watch 2026. That doesn't look anything like Howard. That's a good picture of Howard Lutnick. That's Howard Lutnick. When we last left our Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, it was 2025. He had just become Commerce Secretary, and he was telling, some of my listeners told me who this woman is. So he was telling New York Post reporter Miranda Devine how and why he cut off all relations with Jeffrey Epstein in 2005. Listen to Howard Lutnick talk as Miranda Devine creams her pants.
My wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. Oh, so I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
Well, here we have Lutnick saying he doesn't want to be in a room with a disgusting person, but he's in the same room with Miranda Devine. My listeners told me all about Miranda Devine. And it turns out that, Howard Lutnick said, I decided that I'll never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. But it turns out, they had drinks together in 2011, and Lutnick begged, his wife Allison Lutnick, begged for an invitation to Pedo Island, where he took his children in 2012, and then they went into business together. Miranda Devine actually went through 16 pairs of panties during her interview with sex kitten. I find him a little androgynous, Howard Lutnick. California House Democrat Miranda Devine. Thank you to my listeners from Australia telling me all about Miranda Devine. California House Democrat Robert Garcia is the ranking member. These people are such pigs. They're all pigs. You know what? I know that's not fair to pigs. You're right. That's a cliche to say it's not fair to pigs. But in terms of smell and behavior and wallowing around in mud, they're pigs. California House Democrat Robert Garcia is not a pig. He is the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. They have been tasked by Speaker Mike Johnson to investigate the Epstein files. So just like all of us, Garcia is on... Right, it didn't work. Here we go. Lutnick Watch 2020. That's just not... It's me trying to look better than I am. With too much technology. Okay. It was funny when I thought of it. No, it wasn't. I just wanted to play with the graphics. All right, here is Robert Garcia, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, which is looking into Howard Lutnick and the Epstein files. Here's Robert Garcia on CBS News' Face the Nation.
He hadn't seen Howard Lutnick in years. Turns out he went to see his island off the U.S. Virgin Islands with his family back in 2012, and he had business interests with him in 2014. Are you working with Republican Chairman Jim Comer to bring Howard Lutnick in for questioning?
We have asked Chairman Comer to bring in Howard Lutnick. We have yet had no response. Not only did he visit the island, he had tons of communication with Jeffrey Epstein after it was already known that Jeffrey Epstein was essentially convicted for preying on children. So it is shameful that he's actually in our government. He should not be the Commerce Secretary. He should come talk to the Oversight Committee.
Miranda Devine, your thoughts on Howard Lutnick being talked about this way? Garcia also saying he has questions for Attorney General Pam Bondi, who by law must turn over the Epstein files in their entirety to the House Oversight Committee. She's failed. Word is she's only delivered maybe 1/3 of the documents. The Epstein Transparency Act passed in November of last year with unanimous consent in the Senate. Only one House member, the Honorable Clay Higgins of Louisiana, who some say is batshit crazy. I wouldn't say that about Clay Higgins because he's batshit crazy and he might hurt me. So only one person voted against releasing the Epstein files, Congressman Clay Higgins, who's not racist and is not batshit crazy. Not racist. He could still be a police officer if he wanted to. He's not racist. He voted against releasing the Epstein files. By law, the Attorney General is forbidden from redacting any names in the Epstein files unless it's to protect the identities of Epstein's victims. But we all know she redacted the names of the predators, and in what was an obvious attempt to silence future accusers, she exposed the names of the victims, many of whom wanted to keep it secret. More from ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Robert Garcia.
Look, there's a variety of things. I think number one is we want to ensure that all the names of the men that either were co-conspirators, those that themselves terrorized and brutalized women and children, Those people need to be exposed. That work has begun. An additional piece of this is who was financing Jeffrey Epstein.
Who was financing Jeffrey Epstein? Well, J.P. Morgan Chase. We know that Deutsche Bank financed him. They approved the wire transfers. We also know that in late 2012, after visiting Pedo Island with his children, Howard Lutnick, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the top brokerage houses on Wall Street, Howard Lutnick went into an investment scheme with Jeffrey Epstein to purchase AdFin, an online advertising agency. So Lutnick should be able to provide insight into Epstein's sources of money. Yeah, that would be hot. Yes, Miranda Devine from the New York Post. Howard Lutnick is the sexiest man alive. More from Congressman Robert Garcia.
So, for example, this upcoming week we'll be interviewing Les Wexner, who is likely have been the single largest benefactor and providing financial support to Jeffrey Epstein. Where did he get all of his money, and for what? And where was that money going? That is another critical part of this investigation.
Now, we found out that Les Wexner, his name was redacted from the Epstein files, even though he was listed as a possible co-conspirator, right? They redacted his name. Les Wexner is finally, supposedly going to give a deposition before the House Oversight Committee Wednesday, February 18th. He will answer questions under oath inside his new Albany, Ohio mansion. The subpoena issued last month ordered Wexner to come to D.C. and testify inside the Rayburn House office building, just like everybody else. But the committee decided to allow Wexner to testify from home due to his age and net worth. Wexner's 88, and he's worth billions thanks to founding L Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secret, and also at one time they owned Bath and Body Works, The Limited, Express, and Abercrombie and Fitch. Now, I know some of you are getting confused when I say he was one of the owners of Abercrombie and Fitch. I don't want to confuse you. Okay, so pay attention. Les Wexner once owned Abercrombie and Fitch, but when I say Abercrombie and Fitch, I know you're starting to confuse Les Wexner, the former owner of Abercrombie and Fitch, with Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, who took over that company when Les Wexner sold it in the early 2000s. So I don't want to besmirch Mike Jeffries or his reputation. He had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Nothing. No, Mike Jeffries didn't need Jeffrey Epstein. He could destroy the lives of young people all by himself, allegedly. In November 2024, Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch, who is not Les Wexner, who used to own Abercrombie & Fitch, in November 2025, Mike Jeffries was indicted inside a New York City federal courtroom on 1 count of sex trafficking and 15 counts of prostitution. He wasn't prostituting himself. He was prostituting others. Between the years 2008 and 2015, Jeffries is accused of recruiting models, promising them careers with Abercrombie & Fitch in exchange for sexual services. So I know it's confusing, right? Maybe this helps. Les Wexner was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, who trafficked girls. Jeffries is charged with exploiting roughly 100 young men, prying them with drugs, money, and promises in exchange for sexual favors. Okay? That's how it works. There are no accusations, rumors that Les Wexner or Jeffrey Epstein ever trafficked boys. That being said, there are emails in the Epstein files where Jeffrey Epstein writes to Wexner about how they did, quote unquote, gang stuff together. Epstein wrote, this is from the Epstein files, quote, "I never once, not once, done anything but protect your interests. I owe a great debt to you, as frankly, you owe to me. You and I had gang stuff for over 15 years, a great deal of it that she was unaware of, she being Wexner's wife." That's Jeffrey Epstein with Wexner and his wife. And so the question Wexner has to answer is, how did Jeffrey Epstein end up with your New York City townhouse, one of your Ohio mansions, one of your jets, and about $100 million? Some say he stole it from you. Others say he blackmailed you. So will Wexner answer any questions on Wednesday? We have learned from the latest Epstein dump that the FBI considered Les Wexner a secondary co-conspirator. They listed him as a secondary co-conspirator in the lead up to Epstein's 2019 arrest and subsequent death. The file also said, parts of the file said there was very little evidence, however, linking Wexner to Epstein's crimes. Wexner is 88, very convenient. Here's why. Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, accused of forcing at least 100 men into prostitution, he was 80 in 2024, and his lawyers immediately claimed he wasn't competent to stand trial. When he wasn't competent to run Abercrombie and Fitch, that didn't stop him. But they claimed Jeffries was in the advanced stages of dementia, and a judge in May of 2025 ruled Jeffries was unfit to be prosecuted. He was, according to doctors, suffering from a buildup of calcium deposits in his brain, Alzheimer's, whatever that is. But then late last year, doctors said Jeffries wasn't suffering from dementia, and the trial is scheduled now to move forward. He may be put on trial in October of 2026. It's the Chin. Gigante did this, the guy who tried to kill Costello. When they tried to prosecute him, he claimed he was senile. He was like 15 years old and said he had dementia. Wexner, an Ohio resident, has donated close to $1 million to state politicians since 2019. USA Today reporting that several prominent Ohio politicians announced they would take the campaign contributions they received from Wexner and give that money to charities that help victims of human trafficking. They don't want dirty money. On the other hand, Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno was elected in 2024, and Ohio Republican Senator John Husted, who was appointed by Governor DeWine of Ohio to fill the Senate seat vacated by the very racist J.D. Vance, when the very racist J.D. Vance assumed the office of vice president. Senator Husted, is running for re-election this year. He has taken more than $100,000 from Les Wexner going all the way back to 2001. Both Senators Moreno and Husted, two Republicans from Ohio, say they will not donate Wexner's campaign contributions to any charity that helps victims of human trafficking. They accept dirty money. Back in September of last year, both Republican senators voted against releasing the Epstein files. They changed their vote in November when the pressure grew too much. So Wexner testifies Wednesday. What else should we be expecting the House Oversight Committee to do now that Pam Bondi has declared she's doing nothing? In a letter on Saturday from the Department of Justice to Congress, she wrote that no more Epstein files will be released and that she is in full compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act. Most people beg to differ. You might recall in July of last year, Bondi declared the Epstein investigation was over. There was no one beyond Ghislaine Maxwell who was guilty of aiding and abetting Jeffrey Epstein. The files will not be released. It was suicide, case closed. Well, we know the Clintons are testifying a week from today. What else is on tap? Here is Robert Garcia, the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, telling us what to expect. Not the Judiciary Committee, the House Oversight Committee, not Judiciary, Oversight. Here is ranking member means you're the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. And if Democrats win back the House, he becomes chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and Jim Comer becomes the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee instead of the chair. That's what ranking member means.
We've subpoenaed also the bank records. So we're going through all those, and that information is critical to our investigation.
More of what Democrats will be demanding answers on.
And then, of course, is who was involved in the trafficking of girls and women? It wasn't just Ghislaine Maxwell. Why were there so many women being attacked in places across the country, whether it was New York, but also Palm Beach?
Palm Beach? Palm Beach? Palm Beach, Florida? That Palm Beach where Jeffrey Epstein had a mansion only 8,448 feet away from Mar-a-Lago? That Palm Beach?
You look at Mar-a-Lago. Why was Mar-a-Lago a location where women continue to be trafficked from? So these are questions that we need to ask. We have questions for President Trump. And I think the broader issue here is why wasn't this investigated when these accusations and these stories actually were heard by the FBI years ago? Where was the investigation? Where was the DOJ? And this, by the way, is an issue not just in Republican administrations,
right,
but also ones led by Democrats. We have to get answers.
But certainly, Congressman Garcia, you're not implying that the President of the United States was friends with Jeffrey Epstein or that he knew about the trafficking and did nothing about it, because Trump was flying back to Washington on Monday, and he said, quote, "I have nothing to hide. I have been exonerated. I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I have been totally exonerated on Epstein," unquote. Shouldn't that be enough? And besides him saying that, during her testimony last week, our Attorney General Pam Bondi completely cleared Donald Trump. She said there was nothing in the files that implicated him. She said there was nothing in the files that suggested any illegalities on Donald Trump's part. There was nothing, she said, in the files that would prompt an investigation. You know, we should listen to her, because before being the United States Attorney General, Pam Bondi was the top law enforcement officer in Florida. She served 2 terms as state attorney general of Florida. Pam Bondi was attorney general. This is how I know Donald Trump is innocent. Pam Bondi was Florida's attorney general when the Miami Herald exposed the hundreds of Epstein's victims. She was the state attorney general when lawyers for the victims began taking Epstein to civil court in Florida. She was Florida's attorney general right when all of this was being exposed. So don't you think if Donald Trump had in any way been linked to Jeffrey Epstein, she would have prosecuted him? I mean, she's a lawyer. She's an officer of the court. 8 years as Florida Attorney General. She swore an oath on the Bible. You don't get to that position turning a blind eye to sexual predators. There's no way she would have turned a blind eye. Here she is running for re-election as Florida's Attorney General.
Florida ranks third nationally in calls for help for human trafficking, where young women and children are enslaved and abused. I knew we needed all hands on deck. Businesses and hospitals to spot it, our great law enforcement to stop it, and tougher penalties to punish it. We're taking on Medicaid fraud, pill mills, gangs, and more, and I'll fight to put human trafficking monsters where they belong, behind bars.
Pam Bondi, our Attorney General.
She cleared Donald Trump. That should be enough. You would think, right? That would be enough. But that's not good enough for California House Democrat Ted Lieu, who sits on the House Oversight Committee. He accused Pam Bondi last week of committing perjury when she claimed there was nothing in the Epstein files implicating Donald Trump. He said she was committing perjury when she said under oath that there's no evidence, no documents even suggesting Donald Trump needed to be investigated. Watch how disrespectful my hero, Congressman Ted Lieu, is towards Pam Bondi. How dare Ted Lieu, who may be the best member of Congress, how dare he talk to Pam Bondi this way?
Former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files
I'm going to claim my time. I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Chairman, please stop the clock.
Stop the clock. The legislation. This is ridiculous.
Time belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you. Here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was going to stop the limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation. And as we say here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
Congressman Ted Lieu, the best. He's the best congressman. He's been on my show. Mark Savasco, his chief of staff, used to come on the show all the time. The great Congressman Ted Lieu. Over the weekend, Congressman Ted Lieu took to Twitter and reminded Pam Bondi more evidence that Attorney General Pam Bondi lied under oath. She stated in judiciary hearing, there's no... Wait a second. Was it the House over? Oh, it was the House over? No, it was the Judiciary Committee. Hang on for 1 second. Okay, the House Oversight Committee is subpoenaing Les Wexner, but Pam Bondi testified before the House Judiciary Committee. All right, we begin again. Ted Lieu writes, more evidence that Attorney General Pam Bondi lied under oath. She stated in judiciary hearing, quote, there's no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Epstein articles in this article, Epstein documents in this article show the FBI interviewed a victim who credibly accused Trump of sexual assault Bondi must resign. Well, what article is he referring to? Congressman Lieu was referring to an investigative piece written by Roger Sollenberger. It appeared over the weekend on his Substack, and he was able to pull files from the Epstein dump showing, yes, Bondi lied under oath when she claimed there were no accusations ever leveled against Donald Trump and that he had been completely cleared. Sollenberger writes that in the Justice Department's database of Epstein documents, records show that the FBI spoke to an Epstein victim who said she was also assaulted by Donald Trump. Sollenberger writes the files show the FBI agents who interviewed this woman called her, quote, a credible witness. Sollenberger writes that the FBI file said, quote, the witness stated Epstein introduced her to Trump, who subsequently, I'm going to clean this up a little, forced her head down to his exposed you-know-what, which she then bit. And then in response, the witness said Trump punched her in the head and kicked her out. That victim would have been, quote, approximately anywhere between the age of 13 and 15 when this occurred. The alleged assault took place in the early mid-1980s, and Sollenberger writes the same woman also claims to be an Epstein victim, and one of the reasons the FBI considered her a credible witness is she was able to sue the Epstein estate in 2021 and win.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime. Former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene said over the weekend, I know a lot of people have a hard time with that, but it's the truth. Trump fought the hardest to stop these files from being released. She is no longer a member of Congress, thanks in no small part to pushing for passage of the Epstein Transparency Act, which resulted in so many death threats, she gave up her seat. When she called Trump to complain about the death threats, all he could tell her was, you brought it on yourself. Wow. Telling a victim, you brought it all on yourself. Well, say what you will about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I have. She was out front pushing for passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and she's paid a price. I'm not a fan of her. I think she's a dangerous idiot, but she stepped up. Kentucky House Republican Thomas Massie, who co-authored the Epstein Transparency Act with Ro Khanna, is accusing Bondi of covering up for Trump and leaving at least 2/3 of the Epstein files unreleased. To give you an idea of what led Marjorie Taylor Greene to resign, this is a tweet out over the weekend by Thomas Massie. I am not suicidal. I eat healthy food. The brakes on my car and truck are in good shape. I practice good trigger discipline and never point a gun at anyone, including myself. There are no deep pools of water on my farm, and I'm a pretty good swimmer. You think he might be getting the Trump treatment? Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene appearing on Jillian Michaels' podcast.
I read this morning that Dr. Oz invited Epstein to some Valentine's Day party he and his wife were having in 2016. This is Dr. Oz that's currently serving in the Trump administration over
Oz.
Medicare. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Please continue, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
But that was after Epstein had been convicted of pedophilia.
Well, he wasn't convicted of pedophilia, Marjorie. He was convicted of soliciting an underage prostitute. He got that sweetheart deal where Acosta, the federal prosecutor down there, listened to Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr Epstein's lawyers, and they didn't prosecute, and they worked out some sweetheart deal where Epstein pled guilty to accidentally soliciting an underage prostitute, and he did a little more over a year in prison, but he only slept in the prison. He got to work from his home. But that's okay. Please continue.
How do these people, and that's the hardest part, these are people that we may love, people that we have cheered for, people that I know I supported, and it's both sides of the aisle. Everybody has got to come to the horrible, nasty truth in our faces that they have all come together, and it was about making money, it was about influence, it was about power, and it is being part of the ruling world elites that have affected all of our lives. And if we as a country cannot swallow that down and hold our government accountable, Jillian, it's beyond. I think it's gone already, but it is past gone.
It was past gone when you got elected to Congress. And now it's really gone when you start making sense. When Marjorie Taylor Greene, we go, we're done. Well, the Epstein story, way worse for Trump and the Republicans than I ever thought it could be. All I ever wanted was for the Epstein files to do just enough damage so Trump couldn't even imagine a third term. I never expected the victims to get any justice. I didn't. This thing is out of control in a good way. Nancy Mace, who's also out of control, but in a bad way, but she is the Republican Congresswoman. She's slamming Bondi. She's slamming Todd Blanche and the Department of Justice. She did not like Pam Bondi's Saturday letter to Congress, where Bondi informed Congress that the Department of Justice had complied with the Epstein Transparency Act. Bondi says, I've released all the necessary files. No, you haven't. Nancy Mace warned Bondi, the public is turning on you. And she added, so the courts. Nancy Mace, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican, who's batshit crazy, she said, Bondi better get going releasing all of the files. And when I say batshit crazy, the Nancy Mace is batshit crazy, I mean she's a bigot and transphobic, and a lot of people would back me up on her being batshit crazy. Axios reporting that Trump and congressional Republicans looking for votes in the midterms have done almost irreparable damage to their base. You got to remember, a lot of Trump's voters are obsessed with child trafficking, and they voted for Trump based on this QAnon theory that Trump was sent to D.C. in order to clean out the nest of pedophiles controlling the deep, dark state. Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of those true believers. She was a QAnon conspiracist. So when these people turn, they turn hard. So it's when they find out that Trump has been lying to them, they really turn on Trump. I know it's hard for you and me to understand this, but these simpletons like Marjorie Taylor Greene are really pissed off at Trump because they can't believe he lied to them. They can't believe that Trump would ever lie to them. Steve Bannon, Trump's campaign manager back in 2016, who went to prison in 2024 for refusing to testify before the January 6th committee. Well, Steve Bannon was hoping that Pam Bondi's Justice Department would erase his conviction. He was hoping for some sort of symbolic gesture to clean his record. But now new Epstein files show Bannon was working far too close with Jeffrey Epstein than he ever let on. In fact, right up to the arrest. Steve Bannon, according to the Epstein files and this article in the New York Times, Bannon was trying to repair Epstein's image. The New York Times reporting that Steve Bannon stood up for Epstein right until the very end. In late June of 2019, right before Epstein's arrest, Bannon, according to the Times, was sending Jeffrey Epstein texts recommending how to counter this pedo-trafficking narrative. Bannon sent him texts right before he was arrested. Tell them you're a philanthropist. More texts reveal that Epstein, in the final months of his life, was showering Steve Bannon. Well, showering and Steve Bannon in the same sentence, that's a rarity. Oh, gifts. He was showering Steve Bannon with gifts. When nobody ever showered Steve Bannon with soap and water, including Steve Bannon. Smells really bad. Steve Bannon, bad smell. But he was taking gifts from Jeffrey Epstein, free travel, all in the final months of Jeffrey Epstein's life. And now there are new texts and emails revealing that Steve Bannon was asking Jeffrey Epstein in June of 2019. I mean, this is right before the arrest. He was asking for help in taking down Pope Francis. Who hates Pope Francis? Steve Bannon. How could you hate Pope Francis? In his email to Jeffrey Epstein, Bannon called Pope Francis a globalist who was just as dangerous as President Bill Clinton, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and the entire European Union. Bannon tried to convince Epstein to executive produce a documentary that would portray Pope Francis as a progressive ticking time bomb who has dangerously leftist positions on immigration, LGBTQ issues, divorce, and the church's sexual abuse scandal. Bannon called it all antithetical to conservative Catholic nationalism. Yes, Jeffrey Epstein would executive produce this documentary attacking the Pope's positions on family values like divorce, LGBTQ issues, and of course, the way they handled the church's sexual abuse scandal. Yeah. The ultimate blasphemy was Bannon in 2019 texting Epstein about how crazy Donald Trump is and why it's necessary for Trump's cabinet in 2019 to convene secretly and then invoke the 25th Amendment to get Trump out of the Oval Office. Well, Cat Turd took to Twitter and wrote, I've always been neutral on Steve Bannon. Didn't really care or follow his war room. That's the name of Steve Bannon's podcast. But now I've read the emails between him and Jeffrey Epstein. My God, it's so disgustingly bad. And save your breath acting like it was a documentary. Bannon was recording interviews with Epstein claiming it was a documentary, but it really was. He was trying to put together a puff piece about him. And save your breath acting like it was a documentary. I've been reading the emails between them. They're best friends trying to take down Trump together. It's so bad. Anyone from the war room who's trying to justify this is full of the S word. It's so bad, and there's no coming back from this. No coming back from this for Bannon in the Maga universe. You know, when you lose Cat Turd, dog vomit can't be too far behind. You do not want to lose dog vomit. Wait, it gets better. New revelations, according to The Guardian, that Jeffrey Epstein felt sorry for Brett Kavanaugh during Kavanaugh's 2018 confirmation hearings where Kavanaugh was accused of attempting to rape Christine Blasey Ford. Well, there would have been more women stepping forward, but the FBI didn't respond to the tips. But Jeffrey Epstein felt sorry for Brett Kavanaugh being accused of rape. Odd that Kavanaugh didn't side with the victim, or Epstein didn't side with the victim. He sided with Kavanaugh. You would think Jeffrey Epstein, given his past, would have been very protective of Christine Blasey Ford. No, he was all in on Kavanaugh. And this was revealed in texts that Jeffrey Epstein sent to former Whitewater prosecutor Kenneth Starr, who hired Kavanaugh to work on the prosecution of Bill Clinton. This is true. So Epstein and Ken Starr were texting back and forth during the Kavanaugh hearings because Epstein had hired Ken Starr to be his attorney down in Palm Beach to convince the federal prosecutor Acosta not to press charges. And he and Alan Dershowitz, Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz, worked out that sweetheart deal where it was just jail time for a year. We also should mention that Brett Kavanaugh was hired by Kenneth Starr. Brett Kavanaugh worked on the prosecution of Bill Clinton. Now, Ken Starr had a mistress named Judy Hirschman. She's a lawyer, and when he had a mistress, according to his mistress, Judy Hirschman. And she, too, worked on the Clinton prosecution. She worked for Ken Starr when he was the Whitewater prosecutor. You might want to look up her article in 2018. It was in Slate. And so she recalled that Kavanaugh and she were working together on the Clinton prosecution, Whitewater prosecution. And she wrote that Kavanaugh cornered her in a conference room, and in what she described as a deranged fury, Brett Kavanaugh began berating her, chasing her around the table, screaming at her, and she felt physically threatened by him. When she reported this to Ken Starr, Starr said to drop it because the conservative movement has big plans for Brett Kavanaugh. According to Ken Starr's mistress, Judy Hirschman, in a 2018 Slate article, Starr said, quote, "I'm not going to ask him to apologize to you. I'm apologizing to you for him. This is it. It's over. Forget it ever happened." During Ken Starr's tenure as president of Baylor University, that would be from 2010 to 2016, he had to step down in 2016 because Baylor University, where Ken Starr was president, the university was accused of failing to investigate, report, or take care of numerous allegations of rape, particularly involving football players. That would be Ken Starr, the Whitewater prosecutor who tried to get Bill Clinton impeached for lying about oral sex. He then became Jeffrey Epstein's attorney. According to Judy Hirschman, had a mistress, was cheating on his wife, looked the other way when Baylor University, when he was president of Baylor University, which had an epidemic of rape. Well, Ken Starr served as Epstein's attorney, working at that sweetheart deal in Florida that allowed Epstein to avoid federal prosecution. When he was working for Jeffrey Epstein, he wanted his mistress, Judy Hirschman, to come help him defend Jeffrey Epstein. And she said, well, it looks pretty bad. And Ken Starr told her, quote, everyone deserves representation, Judy. And then he added, Epstein's promised to keep it above 18 from now on, unquote. That's what Ken Starr said to his mistress. Come help me defend Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, he promised to keep it above 18 from now on, like it's a speed limit. And then Starr later served as Trump's defense attorney during Trump's first impeachment, as did Pam Bondi. Ken Starr passed away, I think 4 years ago. CBS News reporting that one of Trump's closest friends, Tom Barrack, who spoke at the Republican convention in 2016 about what an honorable man Trump is, Barrack also chaired Trump's 2017 inaugural committee. New texts have emerged where Barrack called Epstein his role model just 2 years after Epstein served time for soliciting an underage prostitute. Barrack was very close to Jeffrey Epstein and very close to Donald Trump. I mention this because if Tom Barrack married Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, his name would be Tom Barrack. If Barack Obama married Ehud Barak, Ehud Barak's name would be Ehud Obama. Let me see if I can get this right. If Tom Barrack married Barack Obama, he would be Tom Obama. I'm confused by gay marriage. Rolling Stone reporting that white, Jesus. Does anybody even listen? Why would anybody listen to this? Rolling Stone reporting that while Pam Bondi refuses to prosecute any of Epstein's associates, Europe is going full steam ahead. So as I've said, if you've watched any of the Munich security conference, I'll talk about that later in the week, you've got the Trump administration spitting in the face of Europe. Well, Europe doesn't want to spit in the face of America, but they certainly want to spit in the face of Trump and Pam Bondi. And one of the ways of spitting in Trump's face is pursuing the Epstein files, what's in it. And so they're going full steam ahead. Lord Peter Mandelson, the former British prime minister, the former British ambassador to the United States, he just had to quit the Labor Party. He was like the enforcer for the Labor Party. He's now being investigated for passing state secrets to Epstein, as is Andrew Mountbatten. Thorbjorn Jagland, sorry, I'm butchering the name. Thorbjorn Jagland is the former prime minister of Norway. He sat on the Nobel Committee. He's been charged with gross corruption after new files showed that he stayed on Pedo Island and took possible gifts and or loans from Jeffrey Epstein. He could end up getting a 10-year prison sentence. Mona Juul is a Norwegian diplomat. She was her country's former UN ambassador. She was forced to step down as Norway's ambassador to Jordan after new revelations show Epstein left $10 million in his will to her children. Here in the United States, people are going, well, what's up? What did she do wrong? He left money to her children. We don't know right from wrong. We don't understand the concept of dirty money. Miroslav Lajčák, former Slovak foreign minister. He was once the UN General Assembly's president. He resigned from some security role that he held in Slovakia after showing that he was in direct communication with Epstein. And Jack Lang, he was France's culture minister. He resigned as head of, I think it's the Arab Cultural Center. He was forced to resign, and he's being questioned because his grandchildren ended up in Epstein's will, and he was soliciting Epstein for gifts and investment opportunities. Bloomberg reporting that French prosecutors are reopening an investigation into Jean-Luc Brunel, the French modeling agent and one of Epstein's closest European associates, who was found hanging in a French prison cell on February 19th, 2022, while facing trial for trafficking Epstein's girls. And then poor Andrew Mountbatten, stripped of his royal titles, kicked out of the Royal Lodge, a 30-room mansion bequeathed to him by his mother, thrown out. The moving vans took him out. And the Express, a reporter for the Express, wrote an article. She said, I went to Andrew's new home. The smell caught me off guard. So Prince Charles is putting Andrew up in a house on the Sandringham estate, and according to the Express, it literally stinks. And I have some photographs that I doctored to explain why it stinks. So this is one of the rooms where it's one of the British traditions to have your prize corgis after they walk across London Bridge into the next life. Their corporeal remains are mummified, and that is not the source of the smell. These are Queen Elizabeth's. Every single one of Queen Elizabeth's corgis have been mummified, and as you can see, taxidermy in the 21st century has improved to where the corgis are lifelike, yet there's no odor. That's one of the rooms of Prince Andrew's estate, new estate on Sandringham, that stinks. And here you can see they even mummified some of the dog poo, some of Queen Elizabeth's favorite corgi dog poo that's been mummified. No odor. This is a room of mummified dog poo from the Queen and Princess Margaret's favorite corgis. No, I'm sorry. That's the royal cookie room. How did that get in here? Those are cookies. There it is. That's the. Those are mummified corgi poo. Not the source of the smell. There's the source of the smell. Those are King George's mummified corgis, and you can see that's the source of the smell, especially during the rainy season inside former Prince Andrew's new estate. That really stinks. Those would be the corgis owned by Andrew Mountbatten's grandfather. That they were all mummified and they stink, as did the last 3 minutes of this show. Wow. That was a long trip to nothingness. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Please like this please forget the last 3 minutes of this episode and hit the like button so I remain in your... I should mummify this show. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Hit the notifications bell so you can... who wants cookies? I'm in the mood for cookies. Those are cookies. Look, this is how I cope, okay? We all cope. It's not been easy for any of us. What am I supposed to tell you to do? Subscribe to my newsletter, subscribe to this channel, Leave a comment if I made any mistakes. Let me know, because I know I mistook the royal cookies for the Corgi Poo. Corgi Poo was my third wife. Used to call me Corgi Poo. It was an affectionate nickname. Hello, Corgi Poo. She said I reminded her of mummified Corgi Poo. All right, goodbye. I may do a show tomorrow. I'm out of my mind. Thank you. Leave a comment and all that kind of stuff. Thank you.